this segment, we're talking about a lot of technology tools and some of the new uses are being put in, but also a real critical point, which a lot of these different models, we talk about 5 different classes of models of evaluations out there. They're all designed to try to sit down there and eliminate this thing called rater bias as you go through. And we'll talk about those things as we go through it shortly in the process. A lot of different aspects. We have technology is infiltrating every component of every organization as you go through, and human resources is actually part of that as well. We'll do anything from having interviews conducted by artificial intelligence devices that go through, and so you have some basically a chat bot interviewing people as you go through. You put it on a video and have the person responding back for 15 minutes on the video about this. Tell us about your childhood needs, says the little AI as you go through. You have to sit down and process as you go through. Not quite that bad, but that being said, now we're having AIs do an awful lot of HR work. That includes actually some stuff like social media. Employee sits down and says, hey, this so-and-so did a fabulous job. I can't believe it as you go through. Charlene, she's awesome. Okay, little do you know that Charlene has been taking people out to lunch on a daily basis and asking them to put positive things in her. So Charlene's got 17 different positive comments that all end up on her social media, on her social performance management, recorded in the thing. And so in essence, her popularity is making her a superstar employee, even though she sits down and spends more time at lunch than she spends at work as you go through. This is not necessarily a positive thing, but social media says it's okay, and employees are all saying fabulous things about her, so she must be a great employee, right? That's what the media says, that's what all the data says, and that can be what technology is. I'm a little bit skeptical as you go through in the process, as you go through some of the other concerns, electronic monitoring systems. We have facial recognition. You walk onto your campus and the cameras pick you up. Aha, you're on time. You're late. Oh, let's check the parking lot. And you have a security patrol drive by and they're checking a license plate to see who's out there. A lot of times there's so much technology in HR likes to know what's going on. And all of a sudden now we have facial recognition. We're tracking people. We're tracing people for COVID purposes and everything else. We know where every employee is every single moment, every day. Yes, 1984 all over again, except not it's the big government, it's big HR. We need to be careful in the process over there that we are not going past what is appropriate in the workplace and going into what's meddling in the process as they go through. Needless surveilling, people will feel intimidated and maybe start looking for other places that don't do it quite as much as you go through. I want to dive into this concept, and this is huge. We call it rater errors, politics, and increasing reliability and validity of ratings as you go through. A lot of times we have an unconscious bias. And I hear everybody saying this and this and this about discrimination and everything else, but the reality is we're people, we're humans. It's called human resources as you go through. So let's look at some of the appraisal politics, and here are common rater errors that are sitting out there. Similar to me, this is a big one. One time I had a supervisor who supervised a large group of people as he went through. He went through and hired people just like him. They weren't tall like him. They weren't the same color that he was. They weren't the same size that he was. They weren't the same sexual orientation he was. They were all people that were pushy and angry people in the process. He was hiring people like him. And if he evaluated you, that was coming across that he would have people that were aggressive and everything else in the process. So you had an entire organization where the leadership was all similar to me, all like him, not looking like him, but acting like him as you go through. Sometimes you want to sit down and have people that are comparable or a contrast. People are hiring the opposites as you go through. Sometimes a rater gives high ratings to every single employee. Everybody gets a 5 because I'm a nice people and I want people to like me. And that's the most important thing about this organization is me. So let's give everybody gets a 5. Yes. Or strictness. You must sit down and conform. You must worship me in the process over here. You get a 2 because you broke 2 rules last year, and there are my rules as you go through. Sometimes people are like that as you go through. And sometimes you always have that central tendency. Everybody gets a B. Everybody gets a 4 because of the fact of 4 is a nice score and it's not a bad score. It's not quite a perfect score, but a 4 is really good and it's safe for me to sit down and evaluate you. Yes, Halo effect. Some people sit down and no matter what happens, they walk on water. They have a halo about them and a certain glow because of the fact they're an awesome person and they're a great employee in the process. Well, maybe not so much go look at their work and not in the personnel you have inside your head. Or horns, they're always aggressive, they're always mean, they can't do anything right. Have you go back and check the reality? Go check the data, is their performance. Sometimes it may be edgy, except for the fact that they're doing a great job. Don't just sit down and have to give them some credit in the process. These are probably the most common areas that people make errors in the process. Similar to me, contrast, leniency, strictness, central tendency, halo, horns. There's other ones out there, but these are the normal radar errors that you'll see out there. And really, a lot of the performance tools we've talked about, they're designed to get around them and stop people from using an emotional basis to really decide on the person, because it's not about the person, it's about the work. Are they getting the work done that you want them to achieve your corporate goals in a process? And it's really hard sometimes to separate the person from the work that they're doing as you go through, which is why we want to sit down and really focus in on that. To reduce radar errors in the politics, you want to sit down and try to train people in the process. Tell them about the aspect that you're a human being. You're going to sit down and have these traits as you go through. And then sometimes, you have just bias training to make certain we're eliminating that personal bias against choosing people like us, choosing contrast as you go through, sitting down, having the halo or horn effect as you go through. Sometimes they have things, and it depends what terminology you're using. Our textbook here uses calibration meetings, where sometimes an employee is not doing well. So the supervisor talks to the employee, it's not getting through. So HR calls a meeting and you bring the employee and the manager in and you have a dialogue. Usually these meetings are pretty serious because when you go to HR, oh, this could be really bad. And it might be really bad because HR usually is one of the final steps before suspension or termination about behavior in the workplace as you go through. Managers should be sought to give feedback often more than once a year. You want to have a continual dialogue as you go through and create the right context for discussion. Ask the employee to rate his or her performance before the session, and then have the supervisor sit down there and respond to that is very healthy, because you're going to have this dialogue between two different perspectives. Sometimes it's one and the same as you go through. But ideally, you have this ongoing dialogue. You're talking to each other. And sometimes then you start talking the same language and communicating back and forth as you go through. Recognize performance through praise as you go through when you're doing a good job. Solve problems, focus on behavior results, not on the person. Minimize criticism. I've heard people say, are you capable of handling constructive criticism? By the way, nobody is. Nobody likes to be criticized no matter what happens. And it's really cute saying, constructive criticism. I provide all my employees constructive criticism. You know what? They probably whispered behind your back about what kind of a nasty person you are, because you criticize everybody and don't give any positivity in the process. Sit down and be a balanced person, a balanced human being, and talk to people positively, especially praise in public, and then sit down and talk about the negatives in private as you go through. Sit down with the employee, have specific goals, and then set a date sometimes to sit down there and look for, as I'm looking for you to have a 3% increase by this date. Does that work for you? Yeah, I can do that. And then sit down and talk with them on that day to see what's going on. And then sometimes if there's a poor performance, sometimes things happen. Sometimes it could be that they're in a situation, they were super performance in one department, they came to yours, they're doing poorly. It could be they weren't trained well. It could be the location of their desk. It could be a noisy coworker next to them in the next cubicle as they go through. It could be that somebody's now living with them in the process they go through. It could be an elderly parent living with them. It could be trouble with the kids in the process. Sometimes things on the outside inflict themselves on us on the inside as you go through. So meet with the employee and have a dialogue with them, because you're supposed to be the one in charge as you go through. Here's a series of different factors to go through. I'm not going to read these to you, but you'll see overall, you want to sit down there, look at the employee characteristics, what kind of input, what kind of feedback they have as you go through, analyze the performance, and have dialogue in the process as you go through. If an employee is struggling as you go through, pay attention to the solid performers, give them praise and credit when it's due as you go through. Sometimes people are motivated but don't have the ability, they don't have the KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities as you go through. And sometimes people have the ability but simply are not motivated. You may have to work with them to overcome some of these things. And sometimes they're called dead wood. And dead wood, normally you sit down there and toss it up to wash up at somebody else's shore as you go through. If you sit down and have to do it, you have to sit down sometimes and talk to the employee saying, your performance isn't adequate for our organization. And if you don't straighten up, okay, we're going to sit down and put you on a performance improvement plan. And if you don't fulfill these objectives over here, then there's a possibility of formal disciplinary action up to and including termination. We call these kind of plans a PIP, Performance Improvement Plan. PIP, Performance Improvement Plan. It's going to be on a test as you go through, but also as common jargon with most human resource offices as to when you sit down and have an employee in trouble, you give them specific things you want them to work on and have a performance improvement plan as you go through. Sometimes you're going to sit down there, look at the motivation and the ability of an employee, and you're going to see the different aspects, the solid performers, then to sit down there, the low areas where they have misdirected effort, the underutilizers, and then also that dead wood as you go through. Here we have a category of 4 different types of employees, but you'll see how you can handle each one of them. Really, the one that deserves the greatest praise is always your solid performers. But you know what? Sometimes people don't have the motivation, and maybe the supervisor can ignite that motivation as they go through. Or maybe the supervisor can help them use some of the abilities they don't have and sharpen their abilities and their skills and their knowledge, and all of a sudden they can become a solid performer. And sometimes you can't do anything at all, even though you try your very best, and they may not fit the mold, or maybe a transfer may do, or maybe a transfer to some other place outside of your company in the process as you go through. You know, most lawsuits, when it comes down to employers, the vast majority of lawsuits, 2/3 of them were as to how the employee was released, not over the content necessarily, but how, as to how you treated them. Do not treat a person poorly. That is always inappropriate. Make certain that if you're releasing somebody, you're releasing them based upon credible, written, documented performance issues, not on personality, not on a conflict between the supervisor and employee, but based upon a lack of performance as you go through that's documented and part of the formal record. Otherwise, you may end up with a lawsuit and you might lose in the process as you go through. Document, document, document as you go through. Unjust dismissal, other than reasons for others than what the employee claims. People file lawsuits all the time as you go through, but make certain that you can sit down the next day. If you terminate somebody, you need to be able to look in the mirror the next day and say, I did the right thing. That's not very common nowadays, but if you're dealing with somebody's livelihood, you need to be held accountable to yourself as the ultimate authority, in my opinion, as you go through, but also your organization. Are you doing the right thing for the organization, the process? And also that person, sometimes releasing them can actually give them the opportunity to go find something else that they're doing much better at long term. So technology speeds up quality or chaos as you go through. Sometimes we rely so much on technology. If you have a sloppy system, all that technology does is make the sloppy system go faster. So that being said, give frequent feedback if you can, continuous as you go through, and really focus always on the employer, on the problem, the work, not the person, and have an orientation set that way. And then sometimes you need to reset the employee's performance, dialogue or whatever, but make certain you document as you go through. And if anything, try to always eliminate rater bias on evaluations or even on hiring, making certain people have their minds open as they go through, like we talked about previously. So always be open to listening to people, looking for different perspectives, how they solve problems. Take care.